Let's date forever. Here's your weekly dose of relationship fuel with Sammi and Nathan Jaeger. Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're continuing our little mini-series on a fueled up life and diving into the fueled up tank methodology. So this week, we're focusing on the romantic relationship tank.
Yeah, but before we jump in, we're going to recap the 8 different fuel tanks and the idea behind a fueled up life. So Nath, what's a fueled up life?
So a fueled up life is really living a life intentionally and a life that feels full and comes easy and is a life that we've designed, not something that's just happening by default.
So there are 8 different fuel tanks that you need to take care of to have a really wonderful fueled up life. So the first one is self. Your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have.
So the second tank, which is the one that we're going to dive into today, is the romantic relationships tank.
Number 3 is your relationships and network.
So number 4 is humming household.
Number 5, career and business.
So number 6 is wealth and lifestyle.
Number 7, the world.
And the final tank, number 8, is the future.
So let's dive into tank number 2, romantic relationships.
So what does this romantic relationship tank actually look like? So it's making sure that we're prioritizing our romantic relationship by having romantic rituals, regular date nights, and we celebrate each other's successes and our shared successes within our relationship. So it also includes things like communication and making sure that that communication is open and authentic and being vulnerable as well. And that's on the big things and the small things. It's also making sure that our individual sexual needs are communicated and they're being met most of the time. And one of the big things too within this tank is making sure that we know our shared values and that we're living in alignment with them as a couple. It's also some of the more day-to-day things, like ensuring that we know each other's primary love language and that we speak them regularly.
So some of those things might be resonating and you might be able to recall a relationship, even if it's not the one that you're currently in, where it's been lacking a lot of those things. The communication's been shit. It's been a long time between date nights or having quality time together. You know, your sex life's just in the pits.
Not connecting.
Yeah, and you seem to have things that just don't matter to the other person or vice versa, that they really care about things that you don't care about. And neither of you have felt particularly loved or cared for or appreciated within the relationship. So you may have had an experience like that where you were really in a relationship that had a very empty romantic relationship fuel tank. And there's been moments in mine and Nate's relationship where the fuel tank's been closer to empty than full. But now that we have this framework, we are very intentional about adding fuel to this tank regularly. And for us, this fuel really does look like a lot of quality time and regular date nights. So we thought we might share a little bit about how we keep this fuel tank topped up.
So let's first dive into some of the romantic rituals that we've got in our relationship. So our romantic rituals have been things that we've picked up along the way from other couples or little nuances and things like that that we have just adopted in our relationship that are fun little moments of connection. And we've just continued to layer these things on top of each other and built up this really nice repertoire of all these little romantic rituals that we've got.
Like what, Nath? What are you talking about?
So we have talked about this on the show before, but one of the ones that we adopted from actually some Airbnb guests that we had was this idea of whenever we have a drink together and we cheers, that we have a real intentional moment of eye connection while we're doing that. And it's one of those things where it's such a small little moment, but it's one of those really nice things that you can do it when you're anywhere. You can do it at a nightclub, you can do it at home, you can do it in a big crowd of people or whatever. And it's just that really nice moment to be able to connect and intentionally see your partner.
Yeah, I think of these like little romantic rituals within any context of any relationship, not just you and me, but they're kind of like those little secret handshake type moments. Yeah. Like the things that are like, I know you, you know me, like we're in this together.
This means something even though nobody else might get it.
Yeah. And across the course of our relationship, I think there are a lot of these little quirky kind of blueprint things, these little fingerprint things that shape up our relationship that make it totally unique to us.
Yeah. So what's one of your favourite romantic rituals?
Oh, this one's about beverages as well. But
It's clearly a key theme in our relationship.
yeah, but I don't drink beer. I do not like beer. I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the taste of it. It's not my thing. But Nath does. So we've developed this ritual, and I don't know where it came from, of what we now call a BBK. So it's a before beer kiss. So whenever Nath is going to have a beer, he will very consciously come and give me a BBK, a before beer kiss.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
Yeah, it's really cute. But for that one, that kind of just makes me feel like you're thinking of me.
Yeah, it's that intentionality.
So another really big part of having a fueled up romantic relationship is date nights and quality time together. This is something that we have had periods of like where we've really struggled to find a rhythm or a practice that suited us.
Or we just had no intentionality around it, that we would just kind of going from month to month, and if there was an occasion or something that we would go out on a date night, or if we were really feeling disconnected, we would go out on one, but there was no intention around who was organising, whose turn it was, how much we're going to spend, what we might do.
I think this was like one of our biggest, fights. Do you say fight? Disagreement? Argument?
Yeah.
Point of contention was that in my previous career, I was an event manager, like literally an expert at organizing people, places, and things. That was and it still is very much a strong skill set of mine. And that was showing up in our relationship because I was organizing anything and everything for the two of us to have these date experiences, whether or not that was booking restaurants or organizing the logistics or tickets or any of those kinds of things, doing the research. And I was almost always the instigator to the planning process. So I was conceiving, having the idea, doing the planning, how it was all going to come together, budgeting for it, and then also executing. And what I know now is that I was doing all of the giving in creating those experiences and very little of the receiving. And Nath was always on the receiving side of those date experiences. And although, yes, I was having an incredible time when we were on these dates, it was still driven by me.
Yeah.
And there was a level of fatigue that set in to this part of our relationship where I was just tired. I was driving the ship in so many areas of my own life and our life that this really was just somewhere that I wanted Nath to step up and take me out, take me on an experience and an opportunity for me to be the true receiver. So this was an area where I think we had to hit bottom for great change to happen. And that probably happened like 5 years ago or more ago now.
Yeah.
And it wasn't pretty.
No.
It's probably one of the most painful times that I've experienced within our relationship because I felt like I had really been advocating and asking for Nath to step up and take some ownership and accountability for this area of our relationship. And when I was leaving it with him, there was just kind of like crickets.
There was crickets, wasn't there?
Crickets.
Yeah.
And it was something that was really hard to let go through to the goalkeeper and not catch it myself because it also meant that I was missing out. I was missing out on this quality time with Nathan, something that I really craved and wanted and needed in our relationship. So to then take a back seat on planning, organizing, creating opportunities for quality time, knowing that Nath was likely going to drop the ball was really difficult for me. But that's not where we're at now. We've grown through that, and maybe Nath, you can tell us a little bit more about how we do it now. What works for us now?
So a big part of the solution for us actually came from a random Reddit feed somewhere, but it was this idea of a 2x2x2 date night. So the premise behind these 2x2x2 is that every 2 weeks you go on a date, every 2 months you have a weekend away. And then the original Reddit thread was that every 2 years you go on a holiday, but we kind of changed that up and pulled that more in alignment with our values. And we said that twice a year we would go on an overseas trip or a big holiday. So the way that we then work this within our relationship is that for those date nights, because there's 2 a month, I'll host one date night in the first half of the month, and then Sammi will host a date night in the second half of the month. So I am fully responsible for choosing the activity, organising all the logistics, doing everything to plan, and to invite Sammi as well.
Get it in the calendar. The calendar is truth in this household.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it doesn't really count as a date night unless it was put in the calendar like a day prior to us actually going on.
A day? You've got months, months in advance.
Oh, I do, yeah. But we need to be invited to the dates, which is one of the key things about it. But yeah, I am solely responsible for organising that date in the first half of the month, and then Sammi is solely responsible for the date in the second half of the month.
Yeah, I think the key to this is that we had tried other more fluid rhythms before. We'd tried the weekly set time kind of thing, and none of those really worked for us. For our routines, for our lifestyle. Sometimes I travel for work, sometimes Nathan travels for work. We live interstate from our family and friends, so we do pop home occasionally, and that weekly fixed commitment just really didn't work for us. We know it works for a lot of couples, and if that's what works for you, I applaud you. That commitment and diligence is amazing, but we needed a little bit more fluidity, but enough rhythm and pulse that it was predictable and also frequent enough that it still felt meaningful, but not so frequent that it took no effort.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the issues that I was having before we had a structure was that every time that we would talk about going out on a date night, I felt like I needed to plan this massive big extravaganza, and it had to be this huge kind of over-the-top thing. Whereas putting a bit of a rhythm behind it, it's like, we're going to go on one next month as well. So it took a lot of the pressure off to make every date this huge big thing. And it can just be a very simple fish and chips on the beach, or it can be something simple. It doesn't need to be this over-the-top, really expensive thing that we're doing. Just some intentional time that we're spending together and doing something fun and new together as well.
Yeah, for me, a big ingredient in a really good date is the level of thoughtfulness. So we got pretty good at the at-home lockdown date during the government-mandated lockdowns of global pandemic 2020, 2021. But it really is about creating an experience, even if that's at home. You can be very thoughtful about the music that you choose, where you choose to set up that little dinner, what's on the menu. Even if you do end up just Netflix and chilling, is there a theme to it? Are you picking something that's in line with the Japanese night that you're going to have, or the Italian night that you're going to have, or the DIY taco night, or whatever it might be. The level of intentionality as opposed to hey, do you want to hang out on Friday night? Sometimes that's really lovely, but other times it's hey, I saw that there's this cool free exhibition on at blah, blah, blah. Would you like to go with me? That's such a different proposition.
Yeah, it really is.
And unsurprisingly, you're listening to the Date Forever podcast. We've done over 100 episodes now, speaking to couples and experts. And I don't think there's been a single episode where a mention of dates or quality time with one another hasn't been mentioned.
Yeah.
It really is as simple and as complicated as making time for one another.
It really is.
So if I was going to encourage you to find a way to add fuel to your own romantic relationship tank, it would be to have a conversation about what is the perfect date night rhythm for you. How often do you want to be doing this? And what are the parameters or what are the expectations for a date? Because like Nate said, he'd built it up in his head that it had to be this really big thing. And
especially because Sammi was an event manager, and so everything was kind of organised perfectly. Or that's what it seemed like to me anyway.
Yeah, have a conversation about what are the expectations for a date? What do you consider to be a date? What do you want to do more of as a couple? That's probably one of the coolest things that we've done in this space was one day on the beach, we just sat down and wrote a big list of hey, wouldn't it be cool if we went mini golfing and ate at this restaurant and climbed this mountain and all of these kind of things that are oh yeah, I'd really like to do that one day, and put them in a list.
So the next thing within this romantic relationship tank is around communication. And I think outside of dates being brought up on nearly every episode of the Date Forever podcast, I think communication is probably the next thing that gets brought up around having a great romantic relationship. But I think that can be such an ambiguous thing. So what we want to do is just kind of run you through a few of the things that we do within our relationship around communication to make sure that we're on the same page.
So again, I think it's worth noting that Nathan and I have got much, much better at our communication. We've done the reps.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Yeah. And there have been times in our relationship where our communication has been really shit. Whether or not that's been the way or the format in which we were communicating, the frequency that we were communicating, what we weren't saying. I think the absence of communication, some awareness around our body language has changed.
How vulnerable we were in our conversations as well.
Yeah, the openness and depth. But a key part for us, now that we've built a lot of those skills, is about the frequency. So we've now got a really great rhythm that helps us top up our romantic relationship and keeps us connected in terms of communication on the same page really well. But it took us a long time to arrive here.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is a great shortcut for you.
So really starting at the daily level. So something that we do every night is daily gratitude. So what we do is just check in with each other and just ask, what have you been thankful for today? I think this really helps connect with your partner just in understanding what they were really grateful about today and what was maybe some of the little wins that they've had.
I think this question of what are you grateful for today is such a cheat code into your own headspace and your partner's headspace, because I find, well, maybe this is just me, but I find on the days where my headspace isn't at its best, it's really hard to come up with something that I feel grateful for. Whereas other days when I'm feeling so in the zone and abundantly minded and full of love and light, I'm grateful about freaking everything. I'm grateful about having a warm bed to climb into and a glass of water next to my bed.
Air to breathe.
And some clean air to breathe and the lights on. And I'm literally radiating gratitude. Whereas the days when I feel hard and heavy and unfocused, that gratitude doesn't come as easily. So yes, I think this is an incredible way to stay connected to what's going on in each other's worlds at a really micro sort of daily level. I think it also gives a really good sort of temperature check on where your person's at.
Yeah, definitely. So then at the weekly level, we do a little weekly happy hour. So this is checking in on a number of things, but specifically there are a few topics in there which touch on aspects of our romantic relationship. So some of those other things are a bit more daily grind kind of things, but yeah, there's a few aspects in there like expectations, what are we liking and what we're not liking in the bedroom, what would you like more of?
And a whole heap of logistics.
Yeah, that's it.
So that we don't have to talk about it all day, every day.
No.
But it makes up a big part of our communication as teammates as well as, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife.
That's it. Yeah. So our dates on a fortnightly level play a big part of our communication as well. We always find that getting out of the house is a big key enabler to having really great conversation. So those dates really do play a huge part. Then at a much higher level, what we do is we have an annual game plan, which is our annual planning process for our year. We kind of map out what our year ahead's going to look like and map out a bunch of goals as well. And then we break that year down into seasonal priorities. So we break those goals down into smaller things and we do those seasonal check-ins and also monthly check-ins as well, just to see how we're tracking against all those goals, work out what our priorities are for the next month and how can we best support each other.
Yeah, that big high-level one of making a game plan for our year, our annual game planning process, really sets a container of what's important. And then those seasonal and monthly check-ins just help keep us on track of that. It's hey, This is what we agreed is the priority. Are we still on track? Are we still making progress? Because it's all well and good to make the plan. But if you make the plan and then stick it in a drawer and never look at it again, you're probably not as likely to actually get traction with it.
No, that's it. But it's also a great talking point too within our relationship of like, is this actually still priority for you? If it is, why are actions either towards or against that thing? And yeah, so it does really help us keep nice and communicated and connected as well.
Plus, it feels awesome when we tick things off and achieve goals as individuals and together as a couple.
Yeah.
So another really big part of this romantic relationship tank is sex, your sex life. I think this element has varying degrees of importance to different couples, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong. And we've had quite a number of intimacy and sex coaches on the show. And I really believe that this is one of the elements that differentiates mine and Nate's relationship from any other relationship that I have. And it's important to me. So we have regular conversations about what we're liking, what we want to try, what we're not vibing, what we want more of, what we want less of. And that's not to say that we explore all of those things like this week or are able to meet each other's needs all of the time or requests all of the time. But I think what it does create is really open dialogue about where that part of our relationship is at and when it needs more attention. And I think one of the things that we've done is we very regularly invest in growing this area of our relationship. Like in the past, we've done online courses to learn about different elements of pleasure and desire, our sexual blueprints, and then some more specific things, which I just can't recommend enough. Like you've got this body for your whole life. Isn't it amazing to learn how to use it in a way that feels amazing?
Yeah.
So without giving away all of the intimate details of our relationship to the internet, I think one of the things that works incredibly well for us in this area of our relationship is having an element of predictability. And we've talked about this on the show before, that Nathan and I are quite difficult to get hold of on a Sunday night.
That's it.
That's one of our times to shine.
So I think it's just really important to explore what works for the two of you and stay on the same page around that.
Yeah, I think it's also worth like acknowledging that the Sammi that I am, the things that I liked and didn't like when we first got together are wildly different.
Yeah.
And the sex that we have now is like infinitely better than when we first got together.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think that's because we've worked at it.
Continue exploring.
Yeah, and invested in it.
Yeah. So the next big aspect to this romantic relationship tank, which was a big game changer for us as well, is understanding what our shared values are and living in alignment with those. So this was an activity that we did quite some time ago after we started unpacking what our individual values were. And then we realized that within our individual values, we had some overlap, but some that were also unique to each other. And what we wanted to do was really create some alignment in what we do value together as a couple. So what we then worked out were what were our top individual values that we both shared. And then we refined that list down to what really felt right for us.
So when Nate's like using the term values, to just simplify that even more, it's like, what are the things that are important to us?
Yeah.
And what are the things that we agree are things that we want a lot of in our life together? Because there are things that are important to you that aren't so important to me.
Definitely.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
But the shared values part is like really understanding like what are the things as a couple that we want a lot of in our life? What do we want more of in our life? And by knowing that, how can we use that information to guide our decision making? So if you haven't had a conversation about values or you haven't had one in a little while, I would hugely recommend unpacking them, getting curious about who you are and what's important to you. I feel like sometimes couples can fall into like the default path of like creating a life or a relationship that looks very similar to their parents or what they've seen in media or in society without really questioning if that's what they want and if that's what will serve them. And that's what we did. Like we really went inwards and went like, hey, this is our life. This is our relationship. What do we want it to look like? And that'll be unique to you. So we really use our shared values as like guiding pillars or principles for making some decisions big, some decisions small. But a great example is like adventure and travel. Like that's something that's so important to us. Nate's already mentioned it in this episode.
Yeah.
That's how regularly we talk about the things that are important to us. So we make a lot of decisions that allow us to have more travel and more adventure, whether or not that's through work or our personal time or our leisure. It affects the way that we use our finances, use our money, structure our resources to allow us for more travel and more adventure.
Yeah. And these shared values don't need to be set in stone either. It could be that maybe for your year ahead, you really want to focus on doing something. And so that can be in your top values list as something that you really do want to strive towards, that you want to put some focus on and you want to use as that guiding compass to point you in the right direction.
So this is probably like such a cheesy example, but shout out to our friends Cass and Kieran, who one year their focus, the thing that they were valuing most was saving some cash and getting the paving done around the house that they'd built. So it was the year of saving and paving. And I think that's such a nice way, like they were making decisions like, is this going to help us save more money or is this going to help us get the house done?
Yeah.
Saving and paving. So I think one of the things that knowing and understanding these values can do for yourself and for your relationship is probably help guide you away from activities or decisions that will drain your fuel tank really fast. I think about if Nathan and I are living a life that is truly fueled up, it's full of opportunities for us to engage in activities that are in line with our values. And I imagine that if we weren't living like that and we were living quite a long way away from our values, that no matter what you were doing, you'd feel drained and running on empty, approaching a breakdown.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely have felt that at times in the past as well. And we have looked back towards our shared core values to be that compass and to guide us into what we need more of for our, not only our romantic relationship, but for our life to feel more fueled up.
Yeah, I think another great example, a story of when we've used values was like we moved to the beach about almost a year ago now. And that was after a conversation that was like, our life is feeling really heavy and hard. What is it that we're missing? And because we'd spent 2 years in heavily government mandated lockdowns, we had very little travel, very little adventure, and everything we were doing was feeling same. So living waterfront is on our big lifetime vision board. And moving to the beach was a way that we could get more freedom and newness and variety and adventure by just living in a different suburb and living a totally different lifestyle than our inner city suburb that we had previously lived in for a really long time. And it brought us far closer to living in alignment with our values.
Yeah, definitely. So the final game changer for our romantic relationships we want to touch on today was really around our primary love languages. So we've spoken about this a lot in previous episodes as well, and it is definitely something that a lot of guests and experts bring up as being one of those things that has really changed their relationships as well. So this idea of the 5 love languages has come from Gary Chapman, and there is a quiz to be able to go and find out what your primary love language is. And so the idea behind this is that you primarily receive love in one of these 5 different love languages. So they are receiving gifts, acts of service, physical touch, quality time, and words of affirmation.
So the basic premise of Gary Chapman's methodology is that we don't all give and receive love in the same way. And some of us have a preference to give love in a certain way and receive it in a totally different way. And that may or may not be the same as the person that you've chosen to do life with. And the way that they receive love may actually be in a love language that you're not particularly fluent in or one that you find really challenging. And this often comes up if somebody's primary love language is physical touch and then the other person in the relationship is like, oh, I'm not super squishy and cuddly and affectionate and I don't like PDAs, which can be really challenging if that is the way that the person you've chosen to do life with really receives love.
So by understanding your own and your partner's love language, it means that you can be a little bit more intentional about how you show love in a way that they are going to receive it. So for us, my primary love language is physical touch, and Sammy's is receiving gifts. So one of the ways that we've implemented this, or that I've implemented this, is that when I go to the supermarket, I'll often buy Sammy just a little gift. Like, it doesn't need to be anything huge. Like, Sammy loves peanut flavored chocolate.
Basically anything with peanut butter in it or peanuts in it.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, I'm here for it.
So I often just try and find like a Reese's bar or something new that has peanuts and chocolate in it, and I'll buy that for Sammy.
You're also really good at grabbing like a little plant, or like, then it's not always food, I think is what I'm trying to say. Like,
yeah, and occasionally flowers and things like that too. So
yeah, for me, I think receiving gifts can get a little bit misconstrued because it's really very seldom about the item. Like the item only means something if it's meaningful, right? The thing that I love about receiving gifts is like, oh my gosh, while he was at the supermarket picking up milk, he was thinking about me.
Yeah.
That's what I like. That's why I like it.
Yeah, it's the thoughtfulness behind the gift rather than the gift itself. Sometimes it's about the gift itself.
Sometimes it's about the gift. But I think this is something that, again, hasn't come super easily to either of us. There's things that I've created patterns and habits around now to be more intentional about touching Nath. Like where I choose to sit on the couch, I do my very best to like instigate some level of touch, even if it's just like our feet or our shoulders or something small. You know, when we're in the car driving, I'm very conscious to like touch him in some way, whether it's back of the neck or shoulder or leg, or like I use those kind of triggers as opportunities to be like, hey, I'm just sitting here. Here's my chance to give him love in a what feels like very easy way for me.
But it still hits me in the feels.
Yeah, but like giving you a head scratch and you like melt. You're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And I'm like, oh, yeah, all right. Like it's not that I don't enjoy giving you the physical touch. It's just I find it difficult to imagine that you feel loved from having received it like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, anyone can touch you.
Yeah, they can. But it's you who's touching me.
So if you don't know your own primary love language, both the one that you most like to give love in and most like to receive love in, like this is such a great conversation to have with your person. And sometimes you might be completely missing one another. You know, it could be like, oh my gosh, I do this, and this for them all the time. And why don't they know that I love them? It's like, well, maybe they don't receive love in acts of service. Maybe they receive love in words of affirmation, and they really need to be told, hey, I love you. Hey, when you did this, I really appreciated that. Or, hey, I really admire this about you. So if your romantic relationship tank is feeling a little on the like half to empty side, I think this is one of the best like quick wins. If you really doubled down on speaking your partner's love language and knowing it intimately, your relationship can feel very different very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. And even if you don't specifically know what your partner's love language is, or you don't want to like outright kind of try and find out what it is, you can just look at these 5 different love languages and just do something that kind of ticks all 5 boxes. And then you're guaranteed that they're going to be able to feel love from what you're doing.
So I hope you found this episode in our mini Fueled Up Tank series helpful. I believe that better relationships are going to equal a better world. And I know that in my life, when mine and Nath's relationship has been full, overflowing even, that's when the rest of my life has felt so much easier to handle. And just when we've been in a good place, I find that overflows into every other tank of my life. So for me, the practice of adding fuel to our romantic relationship tank every day is such a worthwhile practice. And I hope this encourages you to consider how you can be a little bit more intentional in your romantic relationship, and what are some of those micro moments or those micro deposits that you can make to keep topping up your fuel tank.
So to say thank you for joining us today and to continue to support other romantic relationships, we've provided 10 training sessions to young parents in India to help them make more informed decision making around child rearing and family planning. So thank you so much for making that possible. Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.